Dad promised to hand over the family business to me, then gave it to his new wife, Stepchild. My name is Alexandra Harrison, but ever since I was a little girl running around the noisy woodworking shop with my dad, everyone at Harrison & Sons Fine Furniture has affectionately called me Alex. I'm 35 years old, and for more than a decade, I've been the director of operations and design at my family's business in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the furniture capital of America. I don't just run the day-to-day operations. I live and breathe the rhythms of wood, the designs, the smells of varnish and linseed oil. Harrison & Sons isn't just a place I work. It's my blood, my legacy, my love. My personal life revolves around it too. My husband, David, a strong software engineer who's always been there for me, and our adorable 4-year-old daughter, Emily, who I hope will one day love the smell of wood as much as she does. But exactly 1 month ago, in the very same Cherrywood conference room where I had spent countless hours defending bold ideas and presenting ambitious business plans, the world that I thought was solid beneath my feet was shaken and collapsed with just a few words from the father I loved. My father, George Harrison, a man in his late 70s with white hair and calloused hands who had taught me how to distinguish the grain of walnut from maple, how to feel the soul in each grain, had just finished a long speech about the future of the company. The air in the room was thick. My heart was pounding in my chest. I sat up straight, trying to maintain a professional air. But inside, I was holding my breath in anticipation. This was it, I thought. This was it. The moment he had promised me since I was a child. The day he said his daughter would take over the family torch, breaking the old Harrison & Sons name. The moment he would officially hand over the CEO position to me. But then he spoke, his voice faltering as if something were stuck in his throat, his eyes darting quickly over me, not daring to linger, as if I were just a subordinate and not his blood relative, not the person who had steered the company through so many storms with him. After careful consideration, he began, and in order to bring a fresh perspective, a more dynamic wind to Harrison & Sons in the coming period, I have decided to appoint Kyle Jenkins as the new CEO, replacing Alexandra, effective immediately. Replace Alexandra. Replace me. With Kyle Jenkins. My ears were ringing. The room was silent. I looked at Kyle, my 25-year-old stepbrother, the son of my father's new wife 7 years ago. He sat there, trying hard to hide the smug smile that was threatening to spread across his face. His biggest accomplishment in the 2 years he'd been hanging around the marketing department was spilling a large cup of coffee all over the latest collection's design drawings that I'd stayed up all night to finish. Beside my father, Brenda, Kyle's mother, a woman with a charming face and a sweet voice, put a hand on his shoulder in a meaningfully encouraging way, her eyes flickering to me with a hint of triumph. In the corner of the room, Frank Miller, the loyal foreman who had worked for the company since my grandfather was alive, who had treated me like a son, sat there, mouth hanging open in disbelief. And me? It felt like the solid cherrywood floor beneath my feet had split open, swallowing me whole, taking with it 15 years of dedication, taking with it my absolute faith in my father's promise, taking with it the future I had planned for myself and my little family. Kyle? CEO? Replacing me? The absurdity and pain of betrayal stabbed me too deeply, too painfully. I don't remember how I left that conference room. All I know is that when the heavy wooden door closed behind me, I felt like a rudderless ship in a storm that had just come without any warning. Harrison & Sons was more than a business name to me. It was my childhood playground, my first classroom, my passion. I was the woodshop owner's little girl, an oddity in the male-dominated world of handcrafted furniture in Grand Rapids. But my father, at least in those years, encouraged me. He never discriminated. He saw my love of lines, shapes, and the beauty in raw wood. He taught me how to use basic tools, how to recognize quality wood. And most importantly, he taught me the pride of traditional craftsmanship. My summers weren't spent at camp or the beach. They were spent wandering around the workshop, breathing in the scent of sawdust, watching skilled craftsmen transform lifeless logs into exquisite works of art. I started by sweeping and arranging materials, then gradually got involved in sketching ideas, choosing colors, and finishing products. My father always proudly introduced me to customers and partners. "This is Alex, my daughter, the future designer of Harrison & Sons." He gave me a clear direction. My daughter, he would say when I was a teenager struggling with my first drawings, you have a natural talent and a keen business mind. Harrison & Sons will need you. When I was ready to go to college, he advised me to choose industrial design combined with business administration. Study well, then come back here and help me. Don't let anyone say you can't do it just because you're a woman. You're the future of this place, and you'll prove it to them. Especially after my mother passed away from breast cancer, he relied on me even more. He held my hand, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "I trust you with this business more than anyone else in the world, Alex." I believed in that promise with all my heart and soul. I turned down lucrative offers from prestigious design firms in New York and Chicago after graduating with honors to return to Grand Rapids, to Harrison & Sons. I didn't come back as a princess, I came back as a soldier. I started as a design assistant, then head designer, and finally CEO and design director for the past 8 years. I worked tirelessly, not only to repay my father's trust, but also to prove myself in an industry that was still full of hidden prejudices. I successfully combined traditional craftsmanship with bold, modern design ideas. The collections I was responsible for helped the company increase revenue significantly, expand market share, and reach a younger customer base. I reformed the production process, applying new technology to increase productivity while ensuring exquisite quality. I built good relationships based on respect and trust with the entire staff, from the most demanding old craftsmen to the enthusiastic young designers. I am proud of what I have done, proud of contributing to the name Harrison & Sons to new heights. Things began to change subtly about 7 years ago, when I was 28. My father, who had lived quietly for several years since my mother died, met Brenda at a charity fundraiser. She was in her 50s, a widow with a warm, soft-spoken demeanor and a sympathetic understanding of my father's loneliness. She quickly won his heart. The wedding was a quick one, just a few months later. David and I tried to welcome Brenda and her stepson, Kyle, who had just graduated from high school, into our family. We did it for Dad's sake, though deep down I had a vague sense of unease about Brenda's overly sweet demeanor and the calculating gaze behind her glasses. After graduating from college with a degree in sociology that had nothing to do with business or manufacturing, Kyle was put into the company by my dad. "Let him get some experience, son," my dad told me. I tried to make things easier for Kyle, assigning him jobs in the marketing department as a project assistant, but Kyle was completely uninterested in the work. He was often late and left early, spent most of his time surfing social media or making personal phone calls, and always had a disdain for the work process and his other colleagues, especially me. "You're just a temporary boss, right? Dad will hand it all over to me," he once boastfully told me when I reminded him about his late reports. I had to personally deal with Kyle's laziness and carelessness many times, but when I reported to my dad, he was often brushed off or smoothed over by Brenda. Brenda increasingly interfered in my father's life, from redecorating the house to her liking, changing his longtime friendships, and more subtly, she began to sow doubts in his mind about me. She often made insinuations when they were alone, but sometimes I overheard, "Mr. George, it's hard for a woman to run a big company like this, and she also has to take care of her husband and children. I see that Alex has become pale lately." Or, "Kyle is a man after all. Strong and broad, he can handle heavy work better. You should create conditions for him to show himself." And the climax was, "At this age, you need a strong, decisive successor to deal with the competitors out there. I'm just afraid that Alex is too weak." She played on my father's desire to enjoy his old age, on his unfounded worries that I, as a woman, would have a hard time holding on, and perhaps on his hidden gender biases that he himself was unaware of. I felt the change in his attitude, the gradual distance, the important decisions he no longer discussed with me first like before. But I was too subjective, too trusting in the old ironclad promise, too trusting in fatherly love, and then had to receive a fatal blow in the meeting room that day. Immediately after that horrible meeting, when Brenda and Kyle had left in triumph, I asked to speak privately with my father in his office, the office I had thought would one day be mine. "Dad," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was breaking. "I don't understand. This decision? Why Kyle? What about the promises you made to me?" My dad slumped into his usual leather chair, looking a decade older. He avoided my gaze, looking out the window. "Alex, this is complicated," he said softly. "Brenda thinks this is a good opportunity for Kyle to prove himself, to grow up." Grow up? By destroying this company? I couldn't hold back any longer. Dad knows Kyle's capabilities. What about you? 15 years of dedication, the results you've brought, don't they mean anything? No. My dad raised his voice a little, but still didn't dare look at me. You're already in a good position. You're good. Everyone knows that. But Kyle is young. He needs a chance. Besides, he hesitated, then said the reason Brenda had drilled into his head. You're a woman, Alex. This job is too stressful. You have David, you have Emily to take care of. I want you to have more time for your family. Family time? It was a slap in the face to my self-esteem and my career. He was using my gender and my role as a mother to justify this betrayal. At that moment, Brenda pushed the door open, a fake smile on her face. "Oh, are you two still nervous?" "Alex," she said, coming closer, placing her hand on my shoulder as if she were very friendly. "Don't make things difficult for your father. This is the best decision for the company and for our family. Think about Emily. You'll have more time to play with her." She tried to be sympathetic. "I know you're disappointed, but take a step back and support Kyle. He's your brother after all." Kyle also walked in after his mother, his face full of arrogance. "That's right, Alex. Just relax and go take care of the kids. Leave the company to me. I'll do better than you think." The humiliation, the double betrayal of my father's promise and of the subtle discrimination made my blood boil. I couldn't bear it any longer. I stood up straight, looking all three of them straight in the face. "I can't work in an environment like this," I said, my voice cold but clear. An environment that disrespects ability, doesn't recognize contribution, and uses gender to negate it all, especially when that disrespect comes from your own family. I turned to my father. "I'm resigning, Dad. Immediately." I put my hastily written resignation letter on his desk, where there was still a photo of the two of us smiling brightly on a trip to the Milan Furniture Fair many years ago. Then I turned and walked away without looking back. I came home in a state of mindlessness. David was playing with Emily in the living room. Seeing my dazed expression, he worriedly asked what was wrong. I sat down, hugged my daughter tightly, and told David everything, tears streaming down my face. David was stunned with shock, then anger flared in his eyes. He hugged me tightly. "I can't believe it! Him and that witch! You did everything for that place, Alex. You did the right thing by quitting. Don't worry, we'll get through this. You deserve so much better." David's absolute support was the only lifeline that kept me from completely collapsing. But reality quickly set in. My family's primary source of income, which came from my CEO salary at Harrison & Sons, was abruptly cut off. We had a large mortgage, and the costs of raising Emily were mounting. Financial pressures began to weigh heavily. I began looking for a new job, but it wasn't easy. My background at Harrison & Sons was so deep, and the rumors of family drama may have scared off some potential employers in Grand Rapids. I felt lost, and my self-worth was deeply damaged. To make ends meet, I began taking on small freelance design projects. While I struggled with my new life, news from the Harrison & Sons battlefield continued to reach me, mainly through Frank Miller. The loyal old foreman had decided to stay with the company, not because of Kyle or George, but because of the other workers and because of his love for the place where he had spent his life. But his heart was always with me. Occasionally, he would secretly call or meet me in a secluded coffee shop to update me on the situation. And the situation, as I predicted, was a mess that only got worse. Under Kyle's genius direction and Brenda's manipulation, the company went into free fall. Kyle, with his zero sense of aesthetics and his high-handedness, launched designs that were criticized by critics as gaudy, completely destroying the refined style that Harrison & Sons had always had. To cut costs, he replaced precious woods with cheaper materials and cut corners on the strict quality control process I had established. The result was increasingly poor quality, flimsy, and quickly falling apart. Kyle also fired a number of good employees who had been with him for years and had dared to speak out against his decisions, especially those who were considered close to me. Instead, he put his friends in key positions who had no experience other than flattering the new boss. Morale throughout the entire staff plummeted. The immediate consequence was that major customers, long-term partners with whom I had spent a lot of effort building relationships, began to complain about product quality and unprofessional service. Many large orders were canceled. Revenue dropped dramatically. The company began reporting losses for the first time in many years. Frank Miller, with the experience and meticulousness of a veteran master craftsman, not only was he heartbroken to see his business go downhill, but he began to notice other irregularities, things that were even more worrying than the weakness in management. He noticed in recent expense reports huge regular monthly payments to a brand new marketing consulting and material supply company with a very strange name, KB Solutions. The figures amounted to tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, completely unreasonable compared to the actual scale of operations. KB Solutions? Frank muttered to me during a secret meeting. Sounds familiar, Alex. KB. Kyle and Brenda? That suspicion prompted Frank to dig deeper. He contacted his former chief accountant, whom Kyle had just fired. Together, they went through the invoices and paperwork related to KB Solutions, and the horrifying truth was revealed. KB Solutions was a shell company registered under the name of a friend of Kyle's with a P.O. box in the suburbs. The company did not provide any significant consulting services or materials. All invoices were grossly inflated. Kyle and Brenda had set up this shell company to systematically drain Harrison & Sons, siphoning the company's assets into their own pockets. The amount of money embezzled was estimated to be nearly $500,000 in less than a year of Kyle's tenure. As Frank presented me with the incontrovertible evidence, copies of the fake invoices, the corporate registration information for the fictitious company, the suspicious internal emails between Kyle and Brenda, my anger boiled over. This was no longer stupidity or incompetence. This was intentional criminality, a brutal destruction of my family's legacy. At the same time, Frank said, Dad seemed to be starting to realize that something was wrong. The losses were mounting and could no longer be hidden, no matter how Brenda tried to cover them up. Several of Dad's big customers, longtime business partners, called to complain about Kyle and the quality of the product. Frank said Dad looked increasingly haggard, anxious, and remorseful. He tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer, or Brenda always found a way to interrupt the conversation. The final straw was when Mason's Fine Furnishings, the largest luxury furniture distributor on the West Coast, a strategic partner that I had spent 2 years negotiating and signing an exclusive contract with, formally sent a letter terminating its cooperation with Harrison & Sons, citing poor product quality and unprofessional management. This was a fatal blow. Losing Mason's meant that Harrison & Sons was almost on the brink of bankruptcy. When I read the letter Frank had secretly delivered, I knew I could no longer stand by. My anger and personal pain had now given way to a sense of urgent responsibility. I had to act. Not just for myself, not just to reclaim what had been lost, but for the company, for my father's and my grandfather's legacy, for the future of the dozens of loyal employees whose jobs were at risk. I called Frank and David. We sat down at my house with a good corporate and commercial fraud lawyer whom David had found by our side. We laid out all the evidence on the table. A plan of attack was carefully drawn up. We decided not to take the case to court immediately, because that would have irreparably damaged what remained of Harrison & Sons' reputation. Instead, our strategy was to confront them head-on. I, as a family member and former CEO, requested an emergency meeting of the Family and Shareholder Council, which actually consisted of just my dad, me, I still had a small stake inherited from my mother, Brenda and Kyle, to discuss the serious business situation and the risk of bankruptcy. I requested that my lawyer and Frank Miller be present as well. The meeting took place in my dad's office the next day. The atmosphere was tense to the point of being cut off. Brenda and Kyle walked in, still smug, probably thinking this was just another meeting to hear me pray. My dad looked tired and worried. Frank stood sternly in the corner. I didn't beat around the bush. With my attorney by my side, I began my presentation. My voice was calm, cool, but powerful. I presented financial statements that showed the massive losses since Kyle took over. I cited customer complaints, Mason's termination letter. Then I got to the point. And the root cause of this collapse, I said, looking directly at Kyle and Brenda, is not just incompetent management, it's systemic fraud. My attorney began presenting evidence of the KB Solutions shell company, copies of bogus invoices, evidence of non-performance, shady business registration information, diagrams of money being siphoned out of the company account and into another account linked to Kyle. Everything was laid out clearly, beyond dispute. Kyle's face was pale, and he stammered weak denials. Brenda tried to stay calm, blaming it on a misunderstanding and the accountant's mistake, but her voice was shaky and her eyes were panicked. But the most shocked person was my father. He sat frozen in his chair, staring at the evidence papers on the table as if they were poisonous snakes. His blindness of many years had vanished in an instant, leaving only pain, shame, and horror at the true face of his wife and stepchild, whom he had blindly trusted, to the point of betraying his own daughter. Tears rolled down his aged face. Finally, he looked up, looking straight at Brenda and Kyle with a look of frustration and determination I hadn't seen in him in years. "You two," he said, his voice hoarse, "get out of here. Get out of my company. Immediately." He turned to my lawyer. "Please help me take all necessary steps to recover the stolen money and—" He took a deep breath. "Start divorce proceedings." Brenda and Kyle were dismissed from the conference room in disgrace. It was just me, Dad, Frank, and the lawyer. Dad turned to me, his eyes red with regret. He stood up and staggered toward me. "Alex, my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. I made a terrible mistake. I was blind. I was weak. I hurt you so much. Please forgive this old man. And please," he took my hand, "please come back here. Save Harrison and Sons. It's dying. It needs you. It's yours, Alex. It's always been yours." Seeing the genuine remorse in my father's eyes, seeing the dire state of the company I loved, and thinking of my responsibility to the family legacy, to the workers who were waiting, my heart softened. But I knew things could not go back to the way they were. "I'll come back," I said, my voice firm, "but on one condition. I'll be CEO with full control of the company without any interference. You'll step back, acting as an honorary advisor only when I see fit. Is that okay?" "I agree." He nodded vigorously, tears still streaming down his face. "I agree to everything. Just come back here." So I returned to Harrison and Sons, not as a benevolent heir, but as a leader fighting to regain my position. The road ahead was rocky. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy, employee morale was low, and customer confidence was severely damaged. But I set about rebuilding with a fierce determination. Together with Frank and the remaining loyal staff, we worked day and night. I had to make tough decisions, cut the ineffective divisions Kyle had created, renegotiate debt, and find new sources of capital. I personally called and met with each of our major customers, apologizing for past failures and promising quality and service in the future. I focused on restoring the core values: exquisite design, superior craftsmanship, and business integrity. Gradually, our efforts began to pay off. Some old customers returned. New orders began to come in. Morale in the workshop was restored. Nearly 2 years after my return, Harrison and Sons was not only back from the brink of bankruptcy, but was also back in business, stronger and leaner than before, with new collections bearing my signature and well received by the market. I had demonstrated my leadership abilities, not just with words, but with results. My relationship with my father took time to heal. He was truly remorseful for what had happened. He kept his promise, stepping back, only visiting the workshop occasionally, quietly watching me work with pride and perhaps remorse in his eyes. We began to talk again, never quite the same, but a new respect was established between us. He learned to see me not just as a daughter, but also as a talented CEO. My family life is also gradually stabilizing. David has always been my strongest support. Seeing me find my passion and succeed again, he is even happier than I am. Emily is growing up every day, and sometimes I take her to the workshop on weekends so she can get used to the smell of wood, just like I did in the past. Regaining leadership of Harrison and Sons is more than reclaiming a job or a fortune. It's about reclaiming my identity, protecting my family legacy from greed and betrayal, and most importantly, proving that talent, passion, and dedication have no gender. The road ahead may be challenging, but I know I'm ready to face it all as Alexandra Harrison, CEO of Harrison & Sons Fine Furniture. Women who run family businesses face unique, sometimes invisible, but often overwhelming challenges. Do you think gender bias still plays a role in succession and empowerment in family businesses today? And if you faced similar betrayal and injustice in your career or personal life, how would you stand up and demand justice? Share your thoughts and stories.